Coming up next on the Jeff Crilley Show, if you're a business owner and you're thinking about exiting your business here in the next few years, you're going to want to watch this next episode. We're going to be talking to the co-founders of Isagani Yorke next.
Many are predicting that the worst is yet to come, which is unfortunate, said one person here. Until now, they've enjoyed the reputation of being the nation's icebox.
Watched a burglar in his home this morning by webcam.
As a journalist of over 25 years, stories are what make my world turn.
Reporting live from the Dallas newsroom tonight, Jeff Crilley, Fox 4 News.
But in 2008, I took the jump from my familiar life and started a PR firm from my home.
We're talking about anyone with a camcorder like the one I'm using becomes a television network.
We started slowly growing the company, and we now have over 100 clients, and we've branched into the world of live digital broadcasting. I now own 8 different TV studios and have a huge team, and the stories that I now get to share are sometimes the most important of my life. Life has a funny way of coming around full circle. This is the Jeff Crilley Show.
So as an entrepreneur myself, I get to hang around a lot of very successful entrepreneurs, and I've known several who have exited their business here in the last couple years. But that process of selling your company is very difficult. You as the owner, you're too close to it. And so you actually need to bring in some experts like my next guest with Isagani Yorke. They're with Capital Partners, and Tim and Eli. Thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, Jeff, thanks so much for having us. This is a beautiful studio.
Thank you.
For those at home, we're in front of a live studio audience.
That's right.
So I'm hoping you add in a laugh track.
Yeah, we're gonna have a standing ovation.
That's right. That's right. This is awesome. Yeah.
All right. Why don't we start with you, Eli? How did the company start?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So, Tim and I have known each other for a decade now. He was the best man at my wedding. He's really been a best friend, and I think we've always wanted to start a business together. And since our backgrounds are in kind of institutional finance, we figured, why not start a finance firm? And we really, love the entrepreneur in America. We really thought like, hey, let's kind of go down market. Let's find, these lower middle market companies that don't have like the resources of, an investment bank or other kind of, finance access that some of the bigger companies have, and see if we can, make a difference and be helpful.
Yes. Tim, let's bring you in on this. We're in the middle of a silver tsunami where baby boomers are selling their companies, and they've built it for 40 years, and maybe their kid doesn't want the business. So you're probably dealing with a lot of baby boomers who are like, okay, what do I do with this company now? So tell us how your company comes in and helps navigate that process.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. That's very prevalent today, especially in the DFW area specifically. Right. And oftentimes we'll get approached, right, by these founders and these operators, and they bring us that exact scenario. Right. And many times, right, they've been so engulfed in the business for the 40 to 50 years that they ran it. Maybe they took it over from their parents, and they get to the stage where they're like, my kid wants to follow a different path.
Yes.
And it becomes a very difficult conversation for them to have, right? Because there's a lot that goes into it. Many times their name might be on the business, right? So they're worried about, hey, what type of legacy can I leave if my kid doesn't want to take over the business,
yes,
right? But at the same time, they understand they have to move on to whatever that next step in life is. And, 90% of their net worth is likely tied up in that business. Right. So oftentimes this becomes the most pivotal and monumental event really of their lifetime. Right. And this is what's going to set up not only their children, but their grandchildren and their grandchildren's children down the road. And so we love coming in and helping those operators and those entrepreneurs, right, helping them through the process, letting them understand, right, to go through a sophisticated buying process, kind of all the preparation that's needed to hopefully take them to market and have a successful exit.
We're going to pull up your website, and as we scroll down the website, I want you to talk about the idea that they probably need to come see you sooner rather than later. You don't want to have that business owner who has been managing his or her business to lower their tax burden, and they just don't look profitable on paper. So Eli, talk about the idea that you need to get in there and make sure that you can get them every dollar that they're worth.
Yeah, definitely. Right. I think, right, what Tim was saying is, a lot of these operators have been so busy kind of running the business. They never really thought about like, hey, how do I present this to the outside world? And so really, we come in and make sure that the financials are cleaned up, everything ticks and ties. And really, I always tell people that, you're on the trial of your life, right? This is your baby. This is going to be one of the biggest moments of your life. This will be like your exit, right? This is your swan song. And so for us, right, we kind of come in as your defense team and doing everything, right? Similarly, if you were on a big trial, we come in and we really try to play the prosecution. We try to poke holes in everything and really want to make sure that they have a distinct story so that, the deal doesn't die, during due diligence, and just make sure that, right, they have a clear understanding of the value, right? A lot of the owners that we work with, right, they're engineers by trade, they're marketers by trade, right? They're not finance people per se, but they're selling, right, to private equity firms, to other strategic buyers that are very, pencil sharp on the finance side of the house. So we really try to be like the intermediary translator, so that way they can really communicate the value, right? Because a lot of these owners, right, they know the qualitative side of their business, but it's translating, hey, the quantitative side. Here's the investment value and merit in the company that I built. And so that's really our job, is to bridge the gap so that the way they can get the full value for the business that they've created.
Yes. And one of your services is fractional CFO. And that's important because, Tim, when a business owner is starting the business, they might have a bookkeeper or CPA, but at a certain point, they really need a CFO, even if it's an interim CFO like you guys. Talk about why somebody would bring you in.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. And this is a very big part of our business. Right. What you find, like you said, is many times you start a business, it starts small, and maybe a bookkeeper and a tax CPA is really the needs of the company at that time. And then as you continue to grow and scale, right, just like any other company, the needs change and they evolve over time. But there's this really big gray area, right, where, hey, it's super expensive to bring in a good full-time CFO, finance team, FP&A director, right? And there's this big gray area in the middle where companies say, hey, I think I've outgrown the bookkeeper, but I'm just not at that point where I feel like I can commit the resources to bring someone full-time in-house.
Yes.
And that's really kind of our perfect entry point, right? To kind of quantify it for you a little bit, a lot of these companies, right, on the low end might be doing somewhere $2 to $3 million in top line revenue, all the way up to, right, $30-35 million in revenue.
Yes.
And that whole space is really a great entry point for us because we're able to come in and provide a very cost-effective service, right, to these companies and level up their level of financial sophistication without the burden of bringing on that full-time hire.
All right, Eli, what's one of your favorite success stories? You don't have to name the client, but give us an example.
Yeah, so when a lot of founders start their companies, typically unless they were blessed to go to SMU and come from a wealthy family, right? It's very bootstrapped. So right, they're putting in their own money. Sometimes they raise money from friends and family, right? Aunt Susan that wants to take a gamble on you, or cousin Eddie that's has a few dollars that he can give you and really just believes in your vision. But as you grow and scale, right, in the lower market, it's very competitive, right? It's a long time for a lot of these owners to truly kind of grow their margins. So it's competitive, and they need to raise kind of external finance. And none of these have really, right, they've never had the experience of going through like a sophisticated kind of capital raising process. So for us, right, we love to come in and play the CFO, for them, right, during these crucial inflection points. So I think, a great story for me is, working with the founder. They created an incredible CPG company, right? It's a beverage company, right? They've grown it, they've scaled it, they've kind of taken it as far as they can, but truthfully, right, the margins don't support like growth, right? And it's time to really kind of get the budget for marketing, get the budget, right, to grow the sales operation side. So we come in and really plan them out. We really help them figure out like, hey, this is how much money that you need to raise. And then we do the internal valuation, right? This is what we think the company is worth. This is how much equity you should give up. And then we kind of help them go through the entire capital raise, meeting with investors, being able to kind of know their numbers, right? Because that's, a lot of things that, very simple, very basic and rudimentary, but an investor doesn't feel comfortable, right, if the operator doesn't know their own their own numbers.
Yes.
And so we can kind of come in and play the CFO role and be a partner, be the right-hand man, so that we can kind of help them through that entire capital raise. They can get the money they need, and then they're off to the races.
I'm staying with you, Eli. We met through the great Matt Rosen, who does a show here
right.
called The Grit Mindset. We're going to show some video from a recent episode that you were on. The business owner is too close to the business most times, and they may be great at making widgets or cabinets or whatever they're great at, but they don't know the finance side. And I think that's the Achilles heel of most business owners. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think absolutely, right. I think, so many people who start businesses, right, they're great in their industry, right? They're excellent engineers, they're good marketers. We do, life science companies, so, some of the most brilliant scientists. But there is like a different part of your brain that needs to be kind of like the finance brain. And, truthfully, right, I mean, even if they were somewhat good at it, it's just not a good use of their time, right? They need to be going out and growing and scaling their business.
Yes.
So we really come in and try to make it as palpable as possible. We figure out, hey, these are the things that you need to be tracking. Here are your KPIs. Here are the financial, metrics that we can really grade the success of the company on. And we really boil it down and make it easy for them. So that way, right, they can really feel like they have the tools to grow. So we always say, right, it's like you're flying a plane and we're just building the dashboard for you. So that way you can have a good flight and hopefully one day a successful landing.
All right. One of my favorite questions to ask co-founders and co-CEOs is, what is your partner's brilliance? So let's start with you, Tim. What is Eli's brilliance?
Yeah, besides being able to take down like 30 hamburgers in one sitting, that's pretty brilliant.
That's right.
But,
That is right.
yeah, this is just a great eater, this guy.
That is true.
But no, so I think, right, there's always a balance you need to strike when you're co-founders and co-CEOs, right? And I think with Eli, he's extremely focused on the next great idea and the continual need to evolve as a company, right? And we were talking before, like I said, it's funny, right? Sometimes these great ideas come at 5 a.m. Sometimes, right, they come at 2 a.m, right? So you never know, but he's continually thinking about that. And I think, right, that kind of goes along with the other great thing that I think he's really, really good at, which is he really employs first principles thinking. So he'll never be a victim of groupthink. Everything that he kind of thinks through, I think, comes at a very fundamental level, and it allows him to draw like his own conclusion that he truly thinks is kind of the best path forward.
Awesome. Eli, same question.
Yeah, no, I'm a big believer, right, that if you don't like write something down or like put it to paper, that you'll forget the idea. And so how that translates in the real world is I'm always texting Tim, like multiple times, like every idea that I think pops into my head. And my wife thinks I'm crazy because she'll look at my phone. It'll be like 3 a.m. and I texted him like 15 times in a row, right? And I think Tim's right. He's really just a level steady Eddie, and he'll wake up the next morning and just be like, I guess Eli had a night again. But really just puts our feet to the fire. Really focuses on the execution of the business, really keeps it level set. I think any entrepreneur, right, is always like overly optimistic, right? Where you wouldn't start a company if you didn't think like, hey, I can make this work. And so I often, sometimes get, overexcited. A lot of ideas come, and I think Tim really grounds me, keeps me on the right path and really, pushes our business forward from the execution standpoint.
Outstanding. Okay, we only have a couple minutes left. So why don't you talk to the CEO or owner who is thinking about exiting their business and why they might want to give you guys a call. Eli, you want to start?
Yeah, no, I think it's great, right? So, I have 2 small kids, and the wife jokes that, I have a 3rd kid, which is this company. And I think that's always really kind of our competitive edge when we're going out and picking up clients is that, Tim and I are still very involved in the day-to-day, right? We're always meeting with the business owners. And I think, right, even, people like Matt, right? And it's so great for him to meet with other entrepreneurs. And so that's really where we kind of come in, right? We understand your story. We know what it's been like to be, up late at night. We know what it's like to, have to sacrifice, personal time to really commit yourself to the business. And I think, every owner does that. Truthfully, because one day, they like to exit, right? There's got to be like a pot at the end of the rainbow. And for us, right, our goal is to make sure that they're able to realize that. So we really come in and said, like, hey, like, you put your name on the door, you put your blood, sweat, and tears, you put your personal reputation, your financial stake in here. And the last thing you want to do is kind of botch the sale, right? Because truthfully, if you look at the statistics, there are a lot of businesses, especially where we play in the lower middle market, they don't close, right? And so you have an owner that's put years of their life dedication and they never really get to see the exit. So for us, right, that's what gets us going. That's the driving function, we want to come in and really do right by you, right by the people that you've hired, right, the legacy and all the time. And, understanding that firstly as entrepreneurs, to make sure that you have that successful exit. So that way, as Tim jokes, Dallas is a great golf city. People just want to play golf. So we come in so you can go and spend your days golfing and hanging out with your grandchildren.
Outstanding. Okay, Tim, we're going to give you the final word. What do you want to leave people with?
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the things we think about a lot is how vulnerable you have to be, right, as an operator or a business owner to successfully sell your company, right? Because you need the professional help. You need to, and for what we do, you have to open up your books. You have to show us kind of where all the bodies are buried, right? And it becomes a very emotional and personal process. And for us, right, we're both ex-institutional finance guys. We were at large investment banks. We were at hedge funds, right? We wouldn't be doing what we do now, where we do it in the market, if we didn't love this space. And so for us, what we like to tell them, right, is there's a lot of players out there who can potentially help you sell your business and kind of achieve that optimal outcome. But truthfully, when we go in there, we really focus on asking you kind of the uncomfortable questions.
Yes.
Because if we don't do that beforehand, right, then at some point it's gonna bite you when you're in market and you get asked those questions. So our focus is really to build such a strong relationship with all of our clients, where eventually, right, they feel comfortable sharing all these very intimate personal things about their business with us, all so that we can kind of row in the same direction and help them achieve that optimal exit.
Outstanding. You guys have been amazing. We're going to end with the website, which is isaganiyorke.com. Tim and Eli, thank you for coming on the show, guys.
Awesome. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
That's it for now. We'll see you next time.